what? You're being childish.
Well, of course I am. There's no point in being grown up if you can't be childish sometimes.
Welcome, everybody, to the inaugural episode of RetroBlasting's Journey Through Doctor Who relaunch. And I'm very proud and excited to be doing this with my good friend, Mike Ippolito. Mike, how are you?
I'm wonderful, my friend. How are you?
I am good, thank you. For those of you that don't know, Mike is responsible for getting me this deep into Doctor Who. He's one of the usual suspects of people that got me into this in at the level that I'm at now.
You were a stowaway, I imagine?
Yes, but we'll come to that later.
And so that's what we're here to talk about today with this first episode, is you guys being able to get to know us through our Doctor Who experience, because that's what this whole series is going to be about. So, Mike, you were into Doctor Who before I was. Tell me how that got started for you. Like, were you aware of Doctor Who when you were a kid, or was it something that came later?
Actually, there's kind of two parts of that story. I was initially introduced to Doctor Who probably during my high school years. I had a friend back home, which I will mention. Andy was his name. We were good friends throughout our high school. We went to separate high schools, but we became good friends. And he tried to introduce me to the show. It was actually during he was a big Tom Baker fan.
You may be a doctor, but I'm the doctor.
All I vaguely remember is man with a hat and a scarf. That was kind of about the early stages of what I remember it. But it's kind of tough back then. Being into Star Trek and stuff during the era of Next Generation around there, and also we didn't have a whole big exposure to Doctor Who. It was just on randomly on PBS, or it might have been on a Friday night or Saturday night. I didn't take a whole lot of interest because it was kind of the middle of the run. They were already into Tom Baker, and that's about all I really knew of it.
Is that finger loaded?
Then flash forward, many years ahead, I happened to be on an airplane.
Morning, Doctor. I'm Captain Stapley.
And someone happened to have on their monitor, on the in-seat monitor, was basically the episode of The Unquiet Dead, the Christopher Ecclestone story.
We're under some mesmeric influence.
No, we're not. The dead are walking. Hi.
I kind of just took a glance at it, and I caught the beginning, and then I saw the Doctor Who logo come up, and I said, I kind of remember something about that. So I kind of backtracked a little bit to see where that episode kind of fell out in the series, and then to come to find out there was this whole big history behind it. Basically, I kind of dove in about, I guess if you would consider New Who or modern day Who, rebooted Who, however you will. I kind of started with the new. I picked up around the David Tennant years, then kind of went back, and once Netflix picked up Doctor Who, I went back and started with Rose when the series first came back in 2005.
Yeah, but Doctor what?
Just the doctor.
The Doctor.
Hello.
And then as I progressively got deeper into it, I started researching where the backstory was for this show. And then to find out it went back all the way back to the 60s, and it's basically the longest running sci-fi show ever on television. So I kind of got interested there. And as I progressed through the modern stuff, I started to fall back, doing some research on the original series. And then I just kind of mixed and matched as I went, just to kind of try out the old classic stuff to see what I like, what I didn't like. And I just kind of ran from there. So I'm just kind of getting deep back into the original, and being part of this show will give me a chance to kind of go back and start really from the beginning.
How much of the classic series have you seen up to this point? Like, did you watch it scattershot, or did you try to watch it in order, or are there gaps in your viewing?
Yeah, there's a lot of gaps. I've watched some, Tom Baker. I've seen some William Hartnell, some Pertwee seasons. Now with the availability of the Blu-rays, that gives you a whole complete series at once where we can watch and catch up a lot of those missing episodes.
Yeah, my introduction to Doctor Who is not dissimilar, but it does take place a while later. There was this assumption from people who've gotten to know me over the years that because I lived in England at one point in my youth, that I would be very familiar with Doctor Who. And while the truth of the matter is that I do remember catching glimpses of the show on PBS in the 80s, I did not know what it was. And I just kind of skipped on right by it. I only know that now from memory triggers, having watched classic Tom Baker episodes and having these like flashbacks of visuals that I previously had no context for in my memory.
You don't understand the implications.
There's these episodes of things that you saw as a kid, but you don't know what the show was. You have no idea. When I was watching Pyramids of Mars for the first time, I realized I've seen images from that from way back in my youth. I just didn't know what it was, and I didn't watch the whole thing. When I moved to England in the summer of 90, it was approximately 6 months after Doctor Who had ended its 26-year run.
Some of there's danger, some of there's injustice, and somewhere else the tea's getting cold. Come on, Ace. We've got work to do.
So I showed up 6 months after it ended. I saw the Doctor Who monthly magazine. I guess it might have even been weekly then. I don't remember when it switched to monthly. But it was the Doctor Who magazine was in newsagents. And so I started to visually get a bigger sense of what Doctor Who was as a character. And I saw a real Dalek and a real K1 robot in the Museum of Moving Image in Waterloo in 90 or 91. So I knew that was Doctor Who, but I had no frame of reference. And then, admittedly, I was more interested in the Return of the Jedi stormtroopers that were standing there than the Dalek. Now I think it would be reversed. But then we left in 93, and we left in May or June of 93. So we left 6 months before, approximately, or slightly a few months before, Dimensions in Time came back on the TV screens for that one-off holiday special that was all Doctor Who themed. So I was literally in the pocket. Like, I was in the first pocket of the wilderness years in England and didn't have any exposure to the show. Not at all.
And it seems not a moment too soon.
So I get back to the US with only this sort of visual understanding of who Doctor Who is. And I know him best as the hat, the scarf, the police box. And I go through life not really dealing with Doctor Who. Not a thought in my mind. He's not a thing. I heard about the show coming back in 05, 06, and there were a lot of people watching it on BBC America who were talking about it. And I started to see the costumes show up at Dragon Con, and I'd go, why is everyone in bow ties? And they're like, oh, that's Doctor Who. That's Matt Smith.
Hello. I'm the Doctor.
Oh, what's up with all the fezzes? That's Doctor Who. That's Matt Smith. Oh, okay. But it wasn't until around 2010, 2011, because I was actually starting to watch Tom Baker interviews, just interviews with Tom Baker. Like I wasn't watching Doctor Who or interviews about Doctor Who. I was just watching Tom Baker because I had picked up over the years what an interesting guy he was.
Do you drive a car?
No, I can drive a car, but I don't.
Why not?
Oh, well, it's rather a tedious thing to do, isn't it, driving a car? Well, no, I couldn't describe myself as a Christian, but I mean, I do read my Bible, but that's because I love, cheap, lurid melodrama. Now, Alan Bennett said in his incomparable wry way, he said, quoting and then parodying Larkin, they f*** you up, your mum and dad, and if you want to become a writer, that can come in very handy. Oh, yes, he said, you're the man from Doctor Who. Good God, she said, yes. As soon as I saw you, I knew you were special because my titties began to tingle.
They're so funny. I mean, he's just such a cool guy. And around that time, because of my time living in the UK, I kept up with the BBC News. And in 2011, they announced the death of Elizabeth Sladen. Well, that was around the time that Netflix was finally streaming stuff, and I was watching classic Who episodes, trying to get into it because I was enjoying Tom Baker interviews so much. It's this whole 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon thing. And it was shocking to me to find out that after having watched, Ark in Space and Pyramids of Mars and Android Invasion, that the woman that I was watching as his companion was 8 months after I started watching that stuff, she died.
Don't forget me.
Oh, Sarah. Don't you forget me.
And it was like, and so that was it was like, oh gosh, around that time, Melinda was interested in what I was watching. And she said, well, we should watch the new show as well, which was also on Netflix at the time.
Fantastic.
So we started watching from the Eccleston relaunch and leapfrogging it. So she would watch an Eccleston with me, and then I would watch a classic. And then she would watch an Eccleston, and I would watch a classic. But the classic ones weren't in any order on Netflix back then. It was just, here's the DVD covers. Pick which one you want to watch. And I was like, well, I like fedoras, and I like this guy in a fedora, and ooh, this has the word Ark in it, which like Raiders of the Lost Ark. So that's comforting to me. So I'll click that one. Or then it was like, oh, it's the guy in the hat and it's pyramids, which is like Egypt and Indiana Jones. I'll watch that. And like, that was kind of my sort of slapdash way into Doctor Who. And then right around, I'd say like 2 or 3 years later, things got more organized with the show on Amazon Prime. And that's when I really started watching things and digging into it. But it was a very circuitous route.
Admit it. You don't know what you're doing.
I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just following intuition.
To get to my Doctor Who fandom. And then I met guys like you.
Who is it?
Oh, it's something to do with the doctor. She's been reading the website.
Who were already into it. And they were like, this is a great show. And I'm like, yeah, I'm picking up on that. But you guys with your sort of dedication and enthusiasm got me into it faster.
If you dig deep enough, if you keep a lively mind, this doctor keeps cropping up all over the place.
I started buying the toys and the audio dramas. And then when the Blu-rays hit, it was like, okay, we're in now.
Yeah, it was because of you I got really into the Blu-rays. I know you have the UK versions, and I just bought the US versions.
Yeah, and the only reason I bought the UK versions and committed to those first was because I didn't even know there were going to be US versions. I wasn't sure. And I thought, well, if there are UK versions, I don't know how they're going to be mastered. So the highest chance of them being mastered at the proper frame rate for viewing will be the UK version. Thankfully, we have since learned that the American versions are done to a higher standard than the Blu-rays of the modern Tenet and Eccleston series were. So they're actually correct for American TVs, whereas the Eccleston and Tenet ones actually have a slowdown factor. We won't get into that now. We'll save that for a special episode where we talk about home media. But yeah, I got into the Blu-rays very quickly, and I'm proud to say that I am completely up to date on all of the UK Blu-rays thus far.
Very, very thorough. Well done.
That wasn't easy given the lockdown in 2020 and shipping stopping between countries and stuff. But I managed to pull that out of the fire. So after you got into the show as a show, how long was it before you started getting into, say, the audio dramas or the action figures or anything like that? Did you ever get into any of that? Because I freely admit, I already have a head-to-toe Tom Baker season 12 costume at this point. Like, I've got Sarah Jane Smith's owl from Hand of Fear. I went all in. How far have you gone in that respect? Like, are you still just more of a show devotee, or have you gotten some of the other stuff as well?
I have like variety of stuff. As you can see behind me, I have just a little variety of figures and wall plates and posters and my little light up TARDIS here. So it's kind of like I kind of pick and choose what I want.
It was the prize of my collection.
Your collection? But was it worth it?
I don't collect everything, short of going broke doing that. And that's the same with the Big Finish stuff. You can also go broke doing that. You kind of pick and choose your battles with that. If I see, a story that interests me, I'll pick it up. If there's a multi-part story that I like. I seem to like where they cross the Doctors. I picked up the Tom Baker, David Tennant crossover. That's a 3-part series. So I feel it's kind of a pick your own battles with that, and on what you like. I mean, by all means, buy everything, but I just like to, run through their list and say, this looks like an interesting story. And I read the details on it. And say, oh yeah, I'd like that. I'll buy that. And I do subscribe to Doctor Who magazine. I get the digital edition for that. I enjoy that because if I'm traveling, sitting on a plane or something, I can just kind of, breeze through a couple issues that I've gotten. And it's fairly reasonable stateside. I think it's about $35 a year. There's
been a lot of scuttle over the last few years that Doctor Who has gone the way of Star Wars and Star Trek and some other legacy franchises and mythologies where it's not as good as it used to be and it's in a slump. I was curious to find out because when people tell me that, who are like lifelong Whovians, I always kind of respond with, I haven't really picked up on that because I'm still so behind on 50 years of television and 30 years of audio dramas and, comics and books. I feel like for me, Doctor Who came at just the right time. I almost feel sorry for especially Americans who kept up with Doctor Who in the 80s and 90s, not in the sense that I don't feel sorry for them. I'm actually jealous of them in some ways because they got to meet a lot of these people who are no longer with us at conventions and whatnot. But they also were keeping up with it, in parallel with Trek and Star Wars and everything else. And so they see all of this stuff kind of crumbling at the same time. Whereas for me, Doctor Who came into my lap at just the right time as everything else was crumbling. And I had already, explored everything that was going to be enjoyable for me about it. I suddenly have this 60-year-long runway of content.
I walk in eternity.
What's that supposed to mean?
That's new to me, with all of the behind the scenes backstories and the restoration drama and, the lost episodes and all of this not just fictional content, but production content as well. Cause I love production content. And I feel like it really was it was like my holy grail that showed up at just the right time to keep me distracted from everything else that's falling apart in pop culture right now. And in some ways, what do you think of becoming a Whovian now versus then? I mean, do you regret not having picked it up earlier, or?
They dissect them. Or maybe you haven't reached that bit yet. How old are you?
Excuse me, no one dissects rats in school anymore. Are you from the Dark Ages?
Anyway, moving on.
I can't really say I regret it. It's just the time frame that I, got into it. I mean, as far as availability of things, obviously in the UK, the availability is, much more, common there as far as getting merchandising or going to conventions. Here, it's a little more difficult. I mean, as far as conventions go, I mean, we do get the top names. I mean, we've had Tennant and Capaldi. I've noticed that over in the UK, they seem to have like a smaller type venue where they're like in a gym, almost looks like a gymnasium, where you get people like John Levine, just a lot of the companions that show up to these, and everything is fairly priced, as far as getting an autograph. It's like an autograph and picture is like, 30, 40 pounds.
Right.
You come here, you get, a half a second photo with David Tennant, and you're out $120.
Right.
And I do like like you said about the production side of things of, I like backstories to things. I'd like on the DVDs that they have after the season, they have, behind the sofa and all that stuff. And, where there's commentating or they're commentating from the actual actors that were in it, and I'm interested in hearing their stories, and things like that. And my big thing now that I just, I kind of picked up, I'm getting into is I picked up this book, which is the Doctor Who Lost Episodes.
Oh, yeah.
This was difficult to get. I ordered this 4 times before I finally got one.
Really?
Yeah, it's just so hard to get. I ordered through Amazon. Oh, we'll ship it. Next thing you know, order's canceled. Nobody has it. And I was able to finally get one at some bookstore in New Jersey. They finally sent me one.
And sometimes, very rarely, impossible things just happen, and we call them miracles.
What was it? Is it old, or is it a new publication?
I don't know what the production, the print year on this is, but this is the second. This is actually a second edition. It's been out for a while, and it's just basically in a nutshell the story behind trying to locate the lost episodes. So that's this kind of stuff that interested me. I'm interested in reading in that backstory about, the missing episodes and how stuff was recovered and how stuff's animated and, what direction they're taking with the missing episodes, stuff like that. I kind of enjoy that kind of stuff. So we're kind of the same on that, the behind the scenes or, production information.
As we learn about each other, so we learn about ourselves.
I love the behind the scenes stuff on any film, especially when it comes to restoration stories. And I love making ofs in general. So Doctor Who, not only is it a wealth of that information, but they make it available. That's what I love. These Blu-ray sets for both modern and classic, they are the best sets I've ever seen for special features and bonus content. In an era where the Hollywood studios are getting away from even making their own movies on disc, let alone putting out making of special features, these sets put them to shame. I mean, this is how classic television should be done.
I know they're big, the big space hog, but I like the artwork and the inside with all the art. The American version, you just get your standard Blu-ray case and everything's just shoved in there. And it's just, the same artwork is on every disc and just has the episodes written in the circle, and it's really nothing special,
Sure.
you know?
I've also gotten into, with Who more than I would have expected, autographs. As somebody who doesn't get starstruck and still doesn't, I still kind of like having the autographs from some of these actors. I've got autographs going all the way back to Tom Baker and Katie Manning and Liz Sladen. I've got authentic autographs of hers. It does make me want a John Pertwee, but I'm like, how am I going to find that? And then, of course, I've got personalized autographs with people who are still around, like Anjali, who she was in Sarah Jane Adventures with Liz Sladen. And I've got, the companions and the doctors after Tom Baker as well. So Nicola Bryant and Colin Baker and Sylvester McCoy and Sophie Aldred. And I've got Christopher Eccleston and Karen Gillan, of all people. But I did hit it a little late because I was at Dragon Con when Matt Smith and Peter Capaldi were there on separate years, and I wasn't into Who then.
Yeah.
So I missed out on those autographs at the time. It's like, but I was able to meet Catherine Tate and John Barrowman and people like that. So it's been a fun ride, really fun ride.
A straight line may be the shortest distance between 2 points, but it is by no means the most interesting.
Where do you see this series going for you? Like, what are you hoping to get out of this journey that we're about to take? I'm
just, just kind of share my experience or share our experience with it, and not here to change anybody's mind, and not going to beat you over the head and, tell you need to watch this.
Up.
You've broken my leg!
I'll break your nose if you don't get up.
Hopefully people will, get out of this starting with Doctor Who. If you don't want to start with the classics, you start with the modern. We're going to cover both. Maybe you will start with the modern and then go back to the classics. That's kind of how I did it.
Every great decision creates ripples. Like a huge boulder dropped in a lake. The ripples merge, rebound off the banks in unforeseeable ways.
The way we're going to structure this, everyone, is we're going to start with The Unearthly Child, starring William Hartnell, the original 1963 story. And then we're going to leapfrog to the 2005 relaunch with Christopher Eccleston's Ninth Doctor. So after we do Rose, which is the first Eccleston episode, we're going to go back and do the next Hartnell story. So it's going to kind of go, so just be ready for that, because that'll be a fun, timey-wimey way through the Who universe.
Well, I suppose the best way to find out where you've come from is to find out where you're going and then work backwards.